Namaste and welcome to Dragonfly Kukri and Knives. This video is going to be a pretty exciting video because it's going to be the first video in our production of production kukris versus handmade kukris from Nepal. This is going to be the first modern production kukris that we're going to be talking about. The videos that will follow this, we're going to do one or two companies at a time and talk about their product and how they compare, or what's good about them. You know, are they budget friendly? Are they well made? Are they a good design that follows the tradition of the kukris that are coming out of Nepal? We're going to talk about all of that. But before we get any further, I'm going to do a little recap on the last video that we did. The last video, we were talking about the first BSI kukris that the British started to try to standardize the kukris that were being issued to the Gurkha units attached to their British military units. And so what we have is the beginning of the first mark kukris. In other words, they were known as the mark kukris. They were the acronym that they shortened it down to is the MKs. So the MK1, MK2, 3, and so forth. Now, when we talked about the MK1s, we introduced the idea of, or not the idea, but the products of the Fort Williams version, and then some of the other MKs that started to appear on the scene during World War I and the close of the war. Then once we got into World War II, we saw the first factory-produced kukris being made at wartime in India, such as windlass steel craft when they were making the MK3s, and which looked like this. Although this is not a windlass steel one. This is actually one that was produced by a different company in 1945 at the close of the war. Then we also talked about the MK2s and how they were being produced by a variety of different companies throughout India, such as Pioneer in Calcutta, and like this MK2, the M43, which was produced. And we introduced one that hasn't gotten a lot of press, hasn't really been talked too much about, and that is the Engineer's Kukri, which is a downsized version of the MK2. As a matter of fact, these two were made by the same company. So they were producing for the military to take out in the field, in combat, and then those being issued to the engineers who were building the roads, the bridges, the Quonset huts, the airfields, and who also fell under attack by the Japanese, whether it be by ground forces or by the air. So these guys did use these to clear brush, to build their campsites, and also to defend themselves as a secondary sidearm. A very relevant kukri, downsized, much lighter, and actually, you know, I would have no problem defending myself with this kukri in that it's lighter and faster to use and to defend with. But it's identical in every way except for there's a little bit more belly to it. So as the war closed and we went into the 1950s all the way through the 1990s during the Cold War, we had a lot of different or not a lot different, I'm sorry, we had one particular kukri that was the most outstanding for the longest period of time that was being made, and that was the MK5, which you had different ones, like up into the 80s, they were ranged around an 11-inch blade, and then they got shorter the closer they got to the 90s. And then, of course, we have the current version that's being done. Now, those were no longer being manufactured by companies like Pioneer in Calcutta and so forth. They were actually being given back to the commies who were hand making them. However, they had certain guidelines and specifications that they had to follow so that they were all standardized. So they had a 10-inch blade, and there were two versions, one with patent leather and the other one with regular leather. High polish for parade with the patent leather, and others were more of a satin finish, non-glare, to be used in their training and in combat. So we covered a lot of ground in that last video in dealing with the beginning of the production kukris that were made during wartime. Now that we're into the modern era of the 21st century, a lot of different knife production companies are making kukri type knives. Whether they're trying to be an exact replica or taken off of the original kukris from Nepal and from antiquity, or they're doing a new slant on it to try to make it, an American spin or Westerner spin on a tried and true design of the kukris. Now, before I get into the next phase of this, I want to give a little background about myself during this time period of the mid-'80s all the way through to the '90s, when there was really a big knife craze going on, particularly in the '80s and early '90s, with the American Tanto and the Japanese Tanto. A lot of different companies were producing those blades. They were the hot item on the market. And so you had production companies that were doing them, and you had a lot of custom makers that were making them, such as Phil Hartsfield, Bob Ingleff, Bob Lum, and Shiva Knives, and others. In the production arena, you had Cold Steel, and you had Almar, and you had Shiva Knives, and Pacific Cutlery, and other knife manufacturers that were also doing their version of the Tanto. So it was a very popular knife. Now, the reason why I'm sharing all this is because it was my first introduction into cold steel, when I really took notice of them. And the first production blade that I purchased with a great deal of pride was a cold steel knife. Not that I didn't have other knives, I did, but they were like lesser known companies that were trying to imitate knife companies like Buck Knives and some of their versions and stuff. And they were decent knives and did okay, but they were nothing to the quality and standard of some of these companies that I'm going to be mentioning in the future production kukri makers. Now, one book during that time that I really want to strongly recommend, if you can find this book, it is out of print right now. It was published in 1986, and it was written by Russell Maynard, who is a martial artist who has great love and passion for the Japanese-style blades. So he did a lot of research and put a lot of his passion in this book. The first chapters deal with the Japanese sword and the evolution of the Japanese sword throughout history up into the modern era, particularly at the close of World War II. And then he gets into the current trend of that time, which is the Tanto craze and the various different custom makers that were making them. And he talks about each of them, which I've already mentioned. And then he gets into the production companies that were starting to make a big impact in the Tanto craze at the time, Cold Steel being one of them. Like I said, this is a very good book. It's broken up into the historical part, the current makers, and then in the back, the martial arts techniques dealing with like Jeet Kune Do, along with Tanto Jitsu, and various other disciplines that use knives, and how the Tanto can be relevant in martial arts, in self-protection, and also doing your katas. So it's a very, very good book, and I highly recommend it. Well, I was a graphic designer at that time, and I was trying to branch out and pick up various different knife designers who were making their custom blades and wanted to get some advertising out of what they were making. So I would go to knife shows and gun shows and try to meet them and try to get some business. And I was able to pick up a couple of clients. Now, what I would do is I'd try to do their complete ad campaign. So I would not only design their brochures, but I'd also design their logos, or I would design their spot ads that would go in the magazines. So I would go and get the media kits and give them some ideas on how they can advertise, whether it be full page or a little spot ad in these magazines. Now, the magazines that were very dominant at that time and was utilized to sell cutlery was like Knife Illustrated, Blade Magazine, Guns and Ammo, Black Belt. So it ranged from martial arts arena, the gun arena, and also the knife collecting arena. So oftentimes we would be able to get some good advertising in a lot of different magazines and stuff. So it was an exciting time, and I got to meet a lot of interesting bladesmiths at that time that were doing a lot of custom work, and some of them were really, the gods of blacksmithing, and like Phil Hartsfield being one of them. And one who was a tremendous influence on me was Bob Ingleth before he passed. Tremendous designer and a guy who would just, he would help you in any way possible. If you were designing your own knives, he would give you ideas and suggestions, and then he would help you make it to whatever level you wanted. He could take your design and finish it to completion, or he can do it any step of the way and teach you how to complete it yourself. He was just a tremendous guy. He also wrote a book on scrimshaw, so he was a scrimshaw master. His cutlery shop was associated with muzzle loading shop, so he liked to get into black powder as well as getting into the knife making. And he was also a member of the American Japanese Sword Society here in the States, and he had learned how to make Japanese blades to perfection. He was just really, really great. Anyways, one of the knife shows that I was at, and I was helping one of my friends who I also was doing his advertising for. I would often go to the gun shows or the knife shows, and I would sit in his booth and help him throughout the weekend that he'd be there. And I would get a really great opportunity to meet a lot of different people. And Lynn Thompson was one of them, the founder of Cold Steel. Now, he first started designing blades really in the mid to late 80s. Actually, it was more the mid 80s, I think, when he first started. Now, this is a guy who was an entrepreneur. He had great advertising savvy, had great business savvy, but he was a martial artist as well. And I remember a conversation he was having with my friend, and I was eavesdropping on, and he was describing to him how he was getting so frustrated using a particular maker's knife, and it kept breaking on him. Now, I'm not going to mention that name of the company because right now I don't think that's relevant. The fact of the matter is that the quality of the knife for what he was trying to do and what he needed to do, it was failing every time. That inspired him to get to the drawing board and actually design his own knife. And what he came up with, well, of course, was the first Tanto. It was a Tanto blade. It's a 5-inch blade with a chisel point, what they call a chisel point, which is armor piercing. It was made out of 400 series steel, as he coined it, which is actually around a 440A or 440C stainless steel. And then he had brass handguard, and then he integrated a new material that knife makers were beginning to use in the handle material called craton. And then he put a nice, very prominent pointed pommel at the end. Now, he contacted Camellia's knife company to start producing his blades. And as he would come up with designs, he would give it to them and they would make it, and then he started marketing it. Now, being the marketing genius he would come out and make some very bold statements. He would say, I make the best knife out in the market. No knife will be able to perform better than my knife. And then he would take it and he'd shove it through a car door or do a hammer strike into a car hood, piercing it, and then taking it out and cutting a piece of paper showing that it kept a razor's edge and that there was no damage to the knife. Then he would also do a variety of different cut tests with rope and stuff like that, and just, so he would do a lot of demonstrations, whether it be, back then it was in magazines mostly, so he would take pictures of what he was doing. Later on, as he's popularity gain and as his catalogs began to develop, he would include VHS videotapes of demonstrations of his knives, and there you would actually plug it into your VCR and watch him do torture tests on the various different knives that he was coming up with. Unfortunately, in the 1990s, Camellias went bankrupt, so that caused Lynn to have to go back to the drawing board as far as finding a company that could produce the quality of knives that he needed. He first turned to China, where he figured he could probably make a good knife and still be able to offer it at an affordable price, because that was one of his marketing concerns, was he wanted to make a knife that was really tough that anybody could afford. So but the quality production that they were putting out wasn't to his standard. It wasn't consistent. So he started looking elsewhere. The next place he landed was not only at home, but he also landed in Japan. And in Japan, there he was able to make some very high quality, affordable knives. But as always, as Japan's popularity and trust in their products increased, so did their prices and demand for the making and manufacturing of their products. So again, he had to go out and start venturing out. So he went to places like South Africa, he went to Taiwan, he went to India and Italy, and here in the States and other places, and that's where he's landed, where now he's has a diverse amount of products that are being made all over the world. So he still has them made in South Africa, Japan, United States, Taiwan. Taiwan is basically the major manufacturer. Excuse me, most of his blades. So that's a little background on Lynn Thompson. Now, another thing about his marketing strategy that I think was really fantastic, when he started doing those VHS tapes, he would take them to shows and he would give them away for free. It didn't cost you anything to get his video. You plug it in and you saw him use these knives in a tremendous way. He was doing video advertising like I'm trying to do here in this video blog and review. He was doing on VHS when nobody else was doing it. And this was his marketing genius, because he went from that when DVDs started coming out and CDs started coming out. Well, actually, it was CDs first. He would do the CDs and he would include them in the catalog. So when you would write for the catalog and he'd mail it to you, you had 2 CDs that gave demonstration of every product that was in his catalog. So not only did you get a catalog with the pictures and the descriptions, but you got to see how it was used, and how well it was made and what steel it was made in, and you got to see Lynn and his staff putting them through tremendous torture tests. The first cold steel knife I ever got was in the 90s, and this is it. This was called the Magnum Tonto. At the time, this was the longest one I think that he was putting out. I don't know that he was putting out a 12-inch yet. This one's a 9-inch. It has a hollow grind. It is 440 or 400 series steel, as he put it. It is a more traditional style in that it has a good bowhead, a good curve to it. The blade does slightly curve up. It has the chisel point. Now, the first one was about that long, and it had a single guard, so it wasn't a Suba like this one has, but the handle is identical, and with the craton handle and the pommel at the end, which was a very good striking tool for hammer blow. You could break bricks with it. You could definitely break out a window with it. It was very just form follows function completely. And being the martial artist that he is, this is definitely a modern take on a traditional blade, and he did an excellent job in doing that. He now makes swords and hatchets and axes and folders of all different types, which you'll see some of them here. This is one of his early advertising that was done in the 1990s. Here you'll see that he has the VHS that I was talking about right here, with the demonstration and his product. He would do a full page ad, which in full color. And by the way, in advertising terms, that ain't cheap. Um, so in Blade magazine, this was issued in August of 1999. When he first did his first Kukri design, this is what he came up with. And this was the all-terrain chopper. Let me see. Okay. And this one was being made out of carbon 5, which is whenever Lynn would come up with a design of his, and he would come up with his steel that he would use, he would rename the steel. So in this particular case, he called this high carbon steel that he was using carbon 5, which is basically a 1085 high carbon steel, which is excellent for large knives such as this and buoys and even swords, short swords in particular. This one has a 5/16 of an inch thick, but as you can see, it is not a true kukri. It's more of a kukri type object. And in that he has taken and incorporated the design of a bolo and a kukri with the recurve belly. And so it's really more of an amalgamation of a bolo and a kukri. Now his handle that he designed for this is really, really excellent when it comes to designs. If you can see this, he has what I call the Coke bottle design. It flares very prominently up here at towards the handle, and then you have a really great belly and side swell that is very ergonomic and comfortable in the hand. Very important when you're going to be out there using this all day long, doing any like gardening chores or taking this out camping and chopping firewood and building your shelters and really putting this thing through the use. You want something that even if you don't have gloves and you're using this, you're going to be able to function with it extremely well. And this handle is extremely ergonomically comfortable, no hot spots, just really, really great. He did an excellent job on it. And again, swells at the end just like a kukri would, so it doesn't fly out of your hand. And just for safekeeping, he put a lanyard hole in it that's very large and easy to put cord through. It is a full tang that goes all the way to the butt and encapsulated in this craton handle. Then he put in kind of a nylon sheath here that is pretty stout. You know, it's got a nice thick sides and very thick on the bottom here so it doesn't cut through, with a snap closure slit on the top to slide out, and a Velcro strap, which was back in this day when he came out with it was a pretty well thought out design. Not many makers were doing this, so you could easily take this on and off your belt without taking your belt off. He also came out with a stainless steel version. Oh, and by the way, this carbon 5 was made in the United States. This one is the same identical design, but this was the stainless steel. So it's made out of, and it was being made in Japan, so it's probably ATS-34 stainless steel, which is Japanese equivalent to 440C. But everything else remained the same in design and everything, and even the scabbard was pretty much the same. Same quality, thickness, thick on the edge. The only difference is he did away with the Velcro strap on this one and just went with a basic loop. Velcro strap was much better because it could accommodate different belt sizes. Both of these, unfortunately, are no longer being made by Cold Steel. They do have their machete version of this, but it's made out of 1055 high carbon steel, and it is the thickness of a machete, and it has just a small scanty grind at the edge, versus this terrific design that he did where it's a flat grind that goes all the way down to a nice convex edge. This thing chops like nobody's business. It is just an excellent, excellent tool. If he ever thinks of bringing it back, he could, he wouldn't go wrong by doing that, even though he has many other Kukri type objects. Lynn started going back to the drawing board, though, being an avid collector of martial arts weaponry and historical weaponry. He wanted something that was more accurate to the Kukri, traditional Kukri design. He actually approached an Indian maker, and I don't know if this was Windlass Steel or somebody like it, but this was one of the first prototypes that he came up with for his new Kukri design. Now this one is stamped India, and he did have it made in India. It has, a small bevel on the end here with a convex edge, so almost a Scandi grind. It is flat on the side. It does, it's thicker here and does taper a bit to the point. Not too much though. It's almost about a quarter inch thick. But it's not real consistent all the way through, and I know that would have bothered Lynn. And it has the Mach 3 handle. So it follows some of the same qualities as the Mach 3 on this end of it, but on this end has a nice gentle curve that you'll find in the older Kukris. I happened to purchase this one when he was getting rid of some of his prototypes, because I like I like seeing the evolution of a design, and so what that evolved to was this Kukri. This is called the Gurkha Kukri. When they first came out, they came out in the carbon 5 steel. This one that I'm holding is a more modern one that's made out of the new 01 tool steel. A little better quality steel. It holds an edge a bit better, and yet is still an excellent, excellent chopper, and does extremely well. They also came out with the San Mai version, which has the laminated steel with the harder cutting edge and the softer sides on it, made in the traditional Japanese style. And this is a flat grind that goes down to a nice convex edge. Again, 5/16 of an inch thickness at the spine closest to the handle, but tapers down to the tip very nicely. This is not a heavy Kukri. It's very light and fast, and very strong and durable. You can put this through quite a bit of torture tests, in which he demonstrates very well in his videos on this. If it ain't broke, why fix it? He puts the same handle that he put on the all-terrain chopper, and does a very good job with that. Now, Lynn found out that there was a bando, some Gurkhas who were living in San Diego that had formed together a martial arts training course, and they were known as the Bando Society. So he took his Kukri design down and showed it to them to see if they would say that this was a very accurate production of a Kukri. They liked it. So we asked their permission to put their stamp approval on the blade, and they granted it. So this particular one, and any ones that you will buy from him, will have the Bando Society's logo printed on it as well, showing it that they approved it. It is a very true to, a very accurate design for a Kukri, in that it has a very beautiful curve. It has about a 2-inch belly. It's almost a Sarapati style, in that it's very slender looking, and the handle, although it's very modern, it still has some of the ergonomic features that actual Kukris do have, in particular at the flare at the pommel end of the Kukri, where you could get back there and get some good leverage for chopping. Then he also upgraded the scabbard. Now, anything that he does, he tends to try to get trademarked for his company. So, such as the carbon 5 steel, the 400 series stainless steel, the O1 steel. Of course, O1, a lot of companies make it and have been making it for a long time. The scabbard that he did, he wanted something that was similar to a kydex, but was made out of a plastic that could easily be manufactured, where any of the kukris coming off the line would be able to fit, but be able to fit it in such a way that it would lock it in. So he came up with this locking system that he has called and trademarked it as Secure X. So he does this type of scabbard on a bunch of his different knife styles, not just the kukri. What's really wonderful about it, it has many different lashing points on it. You even have the holes for a good lanyard tie for your leg. It has the Velcro and a button snap that allows you to have easily take on and take off of the corduroy, plus a hold strap. But you really don't need it because the locking system that he has, so once you push it in and get that click, it doesn't fall out. And there isn't a lot of rattle. It holds it pretty good. As you can hear, there's you can barely hear any rattle. And in order to take it out, you just take your thumb like you would on a kydex sheath and just push off on it and you can pull the blade out. So excellent overall package. This is one of the best production kukris out there that's being made right now, that is closest to an actual kukri from Nepal, even though it has a lot of the modern elements in it. And yes, this is being made in Taiwan. Another one that he's come up with that I think is a pretty fun design, and this one is being made out of the carbon 5 high carbon steel, and it has the Secure X scabbard. This one is definitely a weapon. There's no ways about it. The way that he did this with the hand guard, which is designed to be a striking tool to protect your knuckles, but also could be used in martial arts for, throwing a punch if you want to incorporate, a slice and punch. You could definitely come up with a lot of different ways of using this, and it's all around very, very serious business, this kukri is. Now, he has aluminum handle. He has a carbon steel pommel nut at the end that does attach to the tang that goes all the way through. And this in itself can break bricks. It's strong enough to break bricks. It would be lethal as a hammer blow. If you need to get out of a car and breaks a window, if you had this, you could definitely do that easily. It has a high saber grind that comes down to a nice convex edge. It's not as thick as the other one. It's probably, I would say, almost a quarter of an inch thick. You've got, looks like about a 13-inch blade, but it's not real heavy. It's actually very good, very light. Could you use this as a tool? All day long you could use this as a tool. But its primary function, first and foremost in its design, I would say, is a weapon. Now, what's really interesting about this this Secure X scabbard is he actually gives you the instructions on the scabbard on how to properly hold the scabbard for a kukri. So if you learn how to draw out of this thing, you can draw out of any kukri. And that is, he says, danger, do not grip here. So he's talking about don't grip it like this. Grip here, use extreme caution. So you want to hold it here when you're drawing the blade out and when you're putting it back in the scabbard. Now, what's really excellent about this is it snaps right in. That's that Secure X. Also, no rattle whatsoever of the blade inside there. It's an excellent, excellent designed kukri. Would have been any Gurkhas love to have in trench warfare during World War I. That's for certain, because there's just no ending business to this thing. It has form follows function. It's completely designed for martial arts and for self-defense and for combat. But again, it can be used as a tool, and it's a very well made kukri. Now, he did a lot of different machete styles. He has a lot of different sizes. Some have been discontinued, and some are still in production. He also went to folders. Now, this one is the largest of the folders he does in the kukri style, and he has a very good locking system that is Cold Steel's trademark locking system. You could literally stack a bunch of weights off of this, and this is not going to fail. It's not going to break on you and fold and cut your hand or hurt you in any way. Is it as strong as a full tang? No, but it is stronger than any folders I've encountered out in the market. These are the strongest folders that I think I've come across, period. And as you can see, he has that nice, very kukri style blade. The handle is actually longer than the blade. You could use two hands with this if need be. Not enough blade to substantiate using two hands with this, but it does give you a great leverage to be able to go all the way to the back and use it as a chopping tool. And if this was the only knife you had on you, you could definitely get by building a fire and even a small shelter and doing many things that you could do with about it looks like about a 5-inch blade here. The way that you can bring it out, put it back in, is you push this latch right here, that unlocks it and allows you to fold it out. This little thumb nut on it allows you to have it in your pocket, and when you pull it out, it catches on your pants and opens the blade automatically. It's a great design tool and really has a good function for a quick taking the knife out and having it functional and ready to use. This one is called the Raja 2. He does a smaller version of the Raja 1. And then there's the other one, which is really more my favorite of the folders. And this one's called the Spartan. Again, you have a nice, beautiful recurve, very kukri-like, but has the kopis style handle that you would find on like the Greek kopis or the the Celtiberian sword that was similar to this. And so it fits in your hand really nice. Again, you have very good leverage, so you could actually chop with it. And this one fits in your pocket a little bit easier than this one. But very well made, very well designed. And, Lynn Thompson is just an excellent designer who really tries to think outside the box of all the different possibilities of what you can do with a kukri design or any design of a knife. He does some great buoys. Again, a whole line of Japanese stuff. I have some of his Japanese swords, his Chinese blades, the smaller version of his tantos and buoys. He's a great designer. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a great businessman, really. Even though he's pissed off a lot of people by the very bold statements that he has, but when you look at his videos, he's at least standing behind his product and really trying to show that he says he makes the best knife. He believes he's making the best knife, and after all the torture tests he does, it's hard to argue that he doesn't make an excellent, outstanding knife. So that does it for Cold Steel and the kukri type knives that he is producing. Next video we're going to go into is going to be with BK Becker and K-bar knives along with blackjack. Stay tuned for the next video. Like and subscribe on YouTube and leave any comments and that you would wish to leave there. Also, if you have any questions or you want more specific information about these knives I've shown or about the company of Cold Steel, please write me on Messenger at Facebook at Blue Dragonfly Trading Post. Please visit my website at dragonflykukriandknives.com. And again, thank you very much for watching. Namaste. God bless.